You're in the midst of one of, I think, the worst intelligence scandals since the Iraq War, and it's less than 6 months into Trump's second term. This administration's lawless resurrection of the 200-year-old wartime law to rendition people out of this country was always, I think, on its face ridiculous. We know that we're not experiencing World War I or World War II, the other times it was used, War of 1812. And not only does Donald Trump still have to pretend we're at war, his administration had to concoct an elaborate conspiracy to justify it, whereby this Venezuelan gang, Tren de Aragua, is somehow under the direction of the Venezuelan government, and therefore Venezuela is invading our country with its gang members, which means we are at war. Obviously, all that is, ludicrous. We all know that, right? Well, it turns out the people inside the intelligence community knew it too.
Hey everyone, welcome back to True Voice, where we call it like it is. No spin, no lies. I'm Andrew, your host, and today we're diving into something that honestly has me furious as a proud American who believes in democracy, transparency, and truth. Before we jump in, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. If you care about keeping power in check and calling out corruption, this is the channel for you. Let's watch.
New York Times reporting in March, quote, American intelligence agencies circulated findings last month that stand starkly at odds with Mr. Trump's claims and calls into question the credibility of Mr. Trump's basis for invoking the Alien Enemies Act. Well, now we find out the chief of staff for the director of national intelligence is essentially trying to cook the books and rewrite the National Intelligence Council's official assessment to match the White House's lie. In an email to intelligence officials on April 3rd, Tulsi Gabbard's chief of staff, Joe Kent, wrote, quote, we need to do some rewriting and more analytic work so this document is not used against the DNI or POTUS. Let's just come out and say Tren de Aragua leaders are given sanctuary in Venezuela as their gang members commit horrendous crimes in America. The acting head of the National Intelligence Council did make those edits in a new intelligence assessment. But Gabbard fired him and his deputy anyway, smearing them as biased deep state bureaucrats. Charlie Savage is one of the New York Times reporters behind this story, and he joins me now. So, Charlie, just walk me through what the sort of intelligence community itself found when it was doing the work, and what the reaction was from the chief of staff for the DNI.
So this is a convoluted story that you did a good job of setting it up. There were two intelligence assessments. First in February, when the Trump White House is getting ready to issue this Alien Enemies Act proclamation to summarily remove Venezuelans without due process, sent them to that notorious Salvadoran prison. They asked for an assessment of the relationship between Venezuela's government and this gang, because that old law you described requires a connection to the actions of a foreign state to be in this sort of wartime situation where its extra powers would be activatable. The intelligence community looked at their collections, the NSA, the CIA, FBI, everybody else. There is a broad consensus that the gang is not under the direction and control of the Maduro regime in Venezuela. They're hostile to each other. The government treats them as a threat. Their security forces get in gunfights with them. The gang itself is too disorganized to obey instructions, even if there were any. There's a little bit of a partial, not complete dissent by the FBI based on a few prisoners here in the United States. But the rest of the intelligence community thinks they're lying. They're making stuff up to try to get out of their own legal troubles. There's no intercepted communications, no intercepted financial data that you would see if there was this kind of coordination. So the intelligence community says this. The White House says, we're going to say the opposite in this proclamation anyway. Trump will come out in mid-March and he says, I find as president that It's true that the Venezuelan gang is being controlled by this government. And that sets off, when it's revealed that they said something that their government actually thinks is a lie to activate these powers, that sets off this effort to redo the intelligence assessment. And then even when it's in draft form, the chief of staff to Tulsi Gabbard asks for a further rewrite so it cannot be used to damage Trump for having said the opposite.
Now, I think people of a certain age who particularly came up as reporters in the midst of the Iraq war learned intimately in that it's extremely dangerous to have political appointees sort of pushing down and altering intelligence, because what you want intelligence to do is to tell you what really the best assessment is, not what pleases the boss, not what's politically convenient. Obviously, in the case of Iraq, that was a whole other story. Kent's email to me strikes me as like wildly sort of out of line and anomalous for how these things usually go down. But maybe I'm wrong. What's your sort of understanding?
I mean, there's something very blatant about this. Even in Iraq, you know, the worst parts of Iraq were the insinuations by the Bush administration that Saddam Hussein was connected to al-Qaeda and somehow responsible for 9/11, even though they hated him as a secular ruler. There certainly was not a connection at all between al-Qaeda and Iraq. But they didn't produce official proclamations and write intelligence memos saying that. They would just sort of insinuate it and kind of put it out as a vibe. And this is an effort to create official documents that are just saying things for which there is no evidence, or what the available evidence actually actively contradicts. And so in that sense, it's not just comparable to Iraq, but it's actually its own thing. It's something more blatant.
The individual, the chief of staff here, I think hasn't gotten quite enough attention is Joe Kent. Now, he is a failed Republican congressional candidate twice. He ran in a district that was quite Republican and was beat twice by congressional Democrat Mary Gluesenkamp-Perez. She now represents the most Trump voting district in the country. And the reason for that is Mr. Kent's past statements, affiliations and associations with certain extremists proved to be a burden on the campaign trail. He's now the guy, basically, I mean, chief of staff for DNI is a big deal. Like, he's kind of operationally running the American intelligence apparatus.
Well, he's only doing that right now, too. He is also the pending nominee to be the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, which is a very, very important job in the 21st century in the intelligence community. And he has this placeholder job right now as chief of staff to Tulsi Gabbard. So, yes, he had run for Congress. He should have won that race given the makeup of that district, but he was kind of too out there even for a district that is a very pro-Trump district. And now he's in this role, and this is what he's doing with it.
All right, Charlie Savage, New York Times. Great reporting. Appreciate you sharing with us.
We're talking about a Trump official, Joe Kent, who is now basically running operations in the U.S. intelligence community, actively trying to rewrite intelligence to justify a fake war narrative. And not just any narrative, but one that weaponizes a 200-year-old wartime law to deport people without due process. That's authoritarianism 101. Let that sink in. They fabricated a link between a Venezuelan gang and the Venezuelan government to make it seem like we're at war, just so they could flex executive power. The intelligence community? They knew it wasn't true. Agencies like the NSA, CIA, and even most of the FBI said, nope, no evidence. But the Trump White House didn't care. They wanted to do it anyway. And when the facts didn't fit, they tried to change the facts. And here's the kicker. Joe Kent actually emailed officials saying, quote, "We need to do some rewriting, so this document is not used against the DNI or POTUS." That's not national security. That's pure political cover-up. That's how propaganda starts. And if you're thinking, wow, this sounds like the Iraq War all over again, you're not wrong. But even Iraq had the decency to cover lies with vague insinuations. This is blatant. This is state-level gaslighting. Official documents being altered to support lies. And let's talk about Joe Kent. This is a guy who ran for Congress in a deep red district and lost twice. Not because the district flipped, but because he was too extreme, even for Trump country. Now he's running the DNI office and is up for nomination to head the National Counterterrorism Center. I'm sorry, but no. You don't get to fail upwards into one of the most sensitive roles in our intelligence infrastructure after literally trying to manipulate national security data to push xenophobic policies. If you believe in the Constitution, if you actually believe in rule of law, this should set off alarms. Patriotism isn't about waving a flag and bullying immigrants. It's about standing up when our institutions are being hijacked by people who lie to justify power grabs. This isn't just a Trump problem. This is a problem with any political movement that sees truth as optional and people as disposable. So what do? We speak up. We stay informed. And we don't let this get normalized. The moment we stop caring is the moment democracy starts slipping away. If you agree, subscribe to True Voice right now. We're not here to sugarcoat. We're here to hold the line. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear what you think about this insanity. Until next time, I'm Andrew. Stay loud, stay true, and stay strong. Would you like a version of this with visuals and timestamp cues for editing?